All right, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Jennifer Morris, and I am with Madcap Software. And I'm so grateful that you all have taken the time to sit with us over this next session. Today, we are talking about a very important topic, how to go green. In today's era of environmental consciousness, reducing disk space, server resources, energy consumption, it is paramount to combat global warming. We are all in this together, so this is an incredibly important topic to talk about. And joining us today to present this is Nolan Kurzrejo with Madcap Software, my amazing colleague over across the pond in Europe. And I'm so grateful that you're with us today, Nolan. I know you have a lot to cover, and I'm going to turn it over to you in a second. And this is such a great topic, and I'm so glad we're talking about this. But before we do, I just have two quick top of mind things that I always like to remind everybody. This presentation will be recorded, and we're going to send it out to everyone. Also, there is a question and answer area in this presentation console. We encourage you to ask questions as the presentation goes. We're going to do our best to get to as many as we can at the end. Whatever we can't get to live, of course, we'll follow up with everybody. However, as Nolan's presenting, we would be grateful if you could post those questions along the way, and we'll take care of those at the end. So Nolan, I'm grateful for you to be here. Welcome. I know this is such an important concept, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for that great introduction. It's an honor to be presenting today to this audience. It's the afternoon now in France, so I'll do my best to have a proper English language and syntax and terminology. But first, a little bit about me. I'm based in France. I'm based in Brittany. That's kind of the nose of France, if you see the shape of it. And I've been a technical account manager for a while now, and in the CCMS, data CCMS industry for over 10 years now. So I participated in projects in all kinds of industries, with all kinds of regulations and scope as well. So in Europe, but also in the US. On my free time, when there is free time, I'm also a teacher. So I'm an adjunct teacher here at the University of Rennes 2, where I teach technical communication and standard and structured content mostly. And of course, I do, what we all try to do, which is to evangelize around structured content, intelligent content, what can be done, how we can be more efficient throughout. So we'll go through, what's the matter, what's the problem, and we'll jump into then what kind of solution, what can we do as an industry to help. So and then we'll have some time for QA. I'm pretty sure we'll have some time for it. So KVATs to start with. So a lot of this presentation is picked up from various articles, webinars, presentations, and books. I do have a list of resources available at the end in the slide deck, which I think you'll have a copy of. It's also available on the side of your interface. So if you go into the resources, you'll be able to pick a couple of those, the most important ones. Whilst I was, looking into all these different resources to get in a nutshell, what can we say about this topic today? Though I saw a lot of depressing facts, and I don't want to pile that on you. I don't want to go through all the bad things that are happening. Again, the resources are there if you want to have a closer look at what's going on. It's certainly available. The second thing is I do not have all the answers. So there are lots of people out there who are creating different calculations, who are looking at data and storage and electric consumption in all kind of different ways. But we can debate the numbers and we can debate the ways we're talking about, not the ways we're talking about it, but the actual calculation, for example. But there are two facts that remain true, and we can do something about this. E-waste is an issue, and infobesity is an issue. So what are we talking about here? E-waste, electricity, e-waste, is all the energy and all the waste that is created by and for the devices. So that's typically what you hear into newspaper or articles. I'll just cut off my camera at the moment, if you can. Spare me. So production to destruction, how they're recycled or not, if they're scratched before end of life, and so forth and so on, how they're produced, what rare earths are going into those, etc. Storing of content. It's the electricity, it's actually also the electricity of the devices, but the buildings as well. The data center that are, storing all the servers that are meant to store that content, right? So how much waste is created by creating the buildings? 60% of the electricity that is consumed by data centers is for refreshing the data center. That's kind of stupendous. Processes for content. So that's the electricity and the computing processes. If you think about Alexa, for example, of these kind of things, downloading, streaming content, all of that is part of it. If internet were a country, it would be the third country in consumption after China and the US. So that's for e-waste. And infobesity, well, it's basically how much content we have out there. It's the fact that we create too much content. And in the words of many specialists, it's the fact that we're creating useless content and keeping all that content. There is a little star here, and if you read on the slide, you'll see that humanity created more data during the 2 years between 2018 and 2020 than in all previous history. So that was true in 2020. I need to check those numbers again. So far, we're on track. So we'll see that it's actually probably a still valid number. So if you think about a website, if you think about how much is important, how much is used versus how much is discovered and how much is unknown, well, you get to these kind of numbers. So basically, this is picked from an ex-content strategist, well, still a content strategist, called Jerry McGovern, who wrote a book called World Wide Waste. Well, there is a link for you if you want to check it out. And he, was one of these content gurus on the marketing side and worked a lot with, especially with cities. And the fact is that what he found out is that if you remove 50% of a website, of the content on a website, no one is going to even realize it's gone. If you remove another third part of it, maybe 1 or 2 people will complain, probably those who created that content. But basically his findings over the years that he's done as a consultant working on all of these websites is that basically there is 14% of the content that is actually useful. And you know that good information is always information that is actionable. So let's see about it. Global data creation, the content that we're creating. So it's about to explode. You see the little red part here. What we're seeing is exponential. So so the first time I looked into this was 2020. We were at 64 zettabytes of data. We're on track to reach the 180 in 2025. So you can see that to 12, 33, 64, it's definitely growing very, very fast. Let's, but it's kind of difficult to understand what's a zettabyte. So if I look at a zettabyte from a perspective of printing it out, so one zettabyte, it's difficult to understand, right? One zettabyte is actually 1 trillion terabytes. A trillion is 1 million million. and if I had to print 1 zettabyte, I would need 18 trillion trees. So there are only 3 trillion trees. It's not easy to pronounce. 3 trillion trees on the planet. So you can't even print out 1 zettabyte. We have 64, just as a reminder, right? So it's an exponential growth, right? We know all the stories for highlighting how complex that is. But 28, 29 exponential growth, that's very big. And all of that is for storing either useful or, in the word of Jerry McGovern here, crap content. So, that's a bit offensive, isn't it? So let's have a look at this again. It could be even more than 80%. And the idea here, which is, provides this number, is that only 5% of the data is actively managed 3 months after it is stored, right? And here I'm speaking generally, right? 5% of the data is actively managed 3 months after it is stored. So that's very quickly, that's what we want to tackle, what we can do things about, what we can improve. The first part is really the weight of the content. We'll go through the definition of that content, the storage and management, and the processing. So first, 4 aspects. The first one, which is pretty easy to grasp and to do something about, is the weight of the content. So if we talk about alternatives for 1,000 word document, in HTML, you're going to have 39 kilobytes. In PDFs, much more. Okay, certainly there is an impact on the formats. The average web page size is swelling. So if we're talking from 2005 to 2020, already it's 10 times bigger. If we look a little bit deeper into how that web page is constituted, we see that 3% is HTML. 3% is actually text. CSS is 5%, 7% of the fonts. So the fonts that you're using obviously has an impact. 25%, which may be surprising for some of you, but 25% is JavaScript. And 60% is images, right? So that's getting half weight, over a half of the weight is taken by images, if there is one. If we look at the images, of course, there are those images that you add and graphs and things like that. And they can have different resolution. And what you're seeing here on the left-hand side of the screen, 1 megabyte, 4 megabytes, the resolution size, and then you have a little dotted line with an I, and then 9 megabytes and 16 megabytes. And actually, you can, when you create your images and your content, your images, you can select which resolution you have. And actually, if you go over 4 megabytes, you have a heavier image, but the human eye can't even see the difference. So you're creating bigger content, but no one notices, which is a bit strange. So that's definitely something easy to do something about. If we talk about video, of course, you remember images, 16%, 60% of the page, but if there is video, huge consumption. 80% of the page would be eaten up by the video, of course. And same goes, unless you're planning to run an avatar-like video on a super huge screen, there is no need for that ultra high definition. If you cover that, or if you move that over to streaming, then, for example, what we're doing here, or in this case, in this example, what we have is an hour call with 2 people only. If you go to audio, if you go to standard video, ultra high is already double than the standard video, and then it explodes as soon as you go to the ultra high definition, of course. And this is only 1 hour call, 2 people, right? So fairly easy, right? Making sure that we don't go over expectations and provide appropriate sizes and formats to what our users are doing. In the content definition, I'd like to talk to you about minimalism and top 10 tasks. So the idea is that here we want to design and provide content that is relevant, that is useful, that is actionable, right? This is where we should concentrate our strength and our time. And not designed for exhaustivity. Remember these, the iceberg, and there were like 54% of that content that was entirely unknown. Well, that's the idea, and it's the idea that we find also in green design. It's what we want is what's necessary. We want to provide information for what is necessary. So there are 2 methods that are pretty well known. The first one is minimalism, and you've probably heard of that one. It's pretty well known. Or another one which is called top tasks, right? And they both go to the idea that we should write more instructional content and concentrate on what's important for the audience. So obviously, when crafting, information for relevance, there is an analysis step, there is a design step, but it's not the end. When the content is provided, then you can evaluate, use analytics, check what's actually useful, especially now that we do have good capacities to see, what's going on with that information that we've put out there online, and then reiterate the analysis and the design and so forth and so on. Okay, so this is a short story. If you know the person who has this Twitter profile, and this was before pre-Elon Musk, so a couple of, quite a while ago, there was a tech writer profile. I actually wrote that person to say, this is fantastic, you made my idea. And his profile was, I'm a tech writer and I've been deleting content since that year. And I thought it was fantastic. If you think about it, when was the last time you deleted any content? There is another pretty cool, and I'm sure there are other, events and initiatives coming up, but these are 2 that are pretty well known here in Europe. So the other one is the Reimagining the Future of Minimalism in the Nordics, which is led by 2 universities in Finland, the University of Tampere and Jyväskylä. I'll get there. And so they're a researcher and practitioner and professionals, having a look at, this minimalism methods. Can we do things better? So the format of what we provide, and actually how much do we provide, and in what format. And the third one is a little bit more, it's what Madcap is doing as well, which is the content management and the storage of your of your content, sorry. So remember the 3-month mood kind of thing, right? After 5% of the data is actually actively managed after 3 months. So on the content management side, some aspects you can check out is the cleanup. Once you've created content, if you don't need to keep it forever, you can set an automatic deletion, right? A deadline for that content to be gone. Or if you're worried about anything that is automated, just in case, but then there are possibilities to clean up based on analytics, for example, right? If that piece of information has not been watched, used, searched for in the last, 2 years, maybe, or 6 months even, maybe it's time to reconsider its usefulness. Archive. So that's one of the tricks as well. When we think about content lifecycle, we need to think about not only the creation, but go up to the end of that life cycle and to the end of life of that content. What's going to happen to that content once it's not useful anymore. Is there a regulation for you to keep that content, right? Sometimes happen that you need to keep some of that content for up to 10 years, depending on your industry. Sometimes it's even longer. So think about it. Do we want to have a duplication of that content just in case? Do we want to zip it, which is actually making a copy of the content? But then we need to delete the content that has been archived to make sure that we are not creating more content. There are also capacities such as snapshots. This is something that is available in the CCMS, IXIA CCMS. So instead of duplicating the content, we're actually capturing the metadata of that content, which enables our customers to recreate a content or to resend for translation if needed. But it's a much lighter object. So on the archive, we'll go through the reuse as well. The content management, that's typical reuse case, right? We want to make sure that our content is consistent. And so there are ways to maximize that reuse, to start from something that already exists and maximize sharing that content and only work on the variant or the delta of that content. Keep live in the sense of right away accessible and editable, only the content that needs to be that live content, and push the rest to maintenance or to archiving. And another possibility is to use green storage, and I'll go a little bit more into details about that, but that's the idea, that your content can be stored into cloud, for example, that is more or less green. There are some pledges out there. A customer story from archiving. One of our customers renewed. They upgraded, and they took that opportunity. That was a few years back to have a look at that content. When you're switching content or a system, you have an opportunity to have a deeper look into your content and inventory. And in this case, they archived 45% of their data. That was a good project. Of course, if you're thinking about onboarding to a new system, if you're joining Flare or Central, or if you're joining IXIA CCMS, think about your migration strategy. Do you want to duplicate everything that you have already into the new system? How much do you need? How much is live content? That's typical example where it's worth having a good look at your content. I was talking earlier about where you can store your content, and there are some cloud services provider who have green options or green pledge certification. This is an example from Amazon, but there are others that are possible. There are also possibilities to test your website and check if where is your website hosted, whether it's green or not. So if there is a compensation for the services, or if it's using green energy, for example. And the fourth point that I like to make is about content processing. And this presentation I'm doing here is kind of the first level. There will be a follow-up that I'll be presenting on conferences, looking a little bit deeper into that part. Processing example, I mentioned earlier, it could be streaming, downloading, searching, but it's also about how how the content is created itself, how it's designed, and how it's processed by the hosted websites and so on. If you're in the software industry, and most of us have some kind of software component into our tools, or more and more, should I say, then there are things you can do to check your responsibility. There are even some plugins that you can install to check how much you can change on your code to make it lighter. There are also options for, on the design part of the product themselves, creating more greener options, having graceful degradation of service, for example, to make sure that the consumption of electricity is lower. So an example of what I'm talking here, especially on the software side, is a story from Danny van Kooten. So again, his website is in the resource. A Dutch programmer, and he developed a MailChimp plugin for WordPress. You probably know that part. MailChimp is a tool to create newsletter, right? And he did a 20 kilobyte reduction in the code, and it does seem super little, right? But the fact is that it's multiplied. So there were 2 million websites which are using his plugin, right? So 2 million. If you multiply, that's a monthly CO2 reduction of 59 tons. And if you count a tree, what it can capture in a month, it's around 5,900 trees that are saved every month. So a small change multiplied can have a big impact. Remember that. And of course, there are other things that you can do at your level. In your company, you can talk to your HR or to your internal training team to talk about digital hygiene. You can talk with marketing about what they do with the content created. See, if it's possible to have a green label or a green mode for your websites and your websites mostly. And eventually, if you do have a development team and a UX team internally, you could talk to them about green design and graceful degradation. And the final, almost final word here is to remember that everything that is digital is electrical. And so everything that is digital consumes energy. This is a quick checklist. So for you to do as a person, as an individual, but also in your company. So of course, you'll see that some of those are pretty easy to to do. Most of them are actually pretty easy to do. There is, I want just to highlight this digital cleanup day. So every year there is a digital cleanup day. You can participate, you can register as a company or an individual, and follow the best practices. It's just one day to remember to clear up a few things in your digital life. So resources are here, and I think this is where I hand over the mic to Jen.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. Yeah, this was fantastic. We have some questions to get to before we wrap. So thanks everybody for posting those. Feel free to jot any down there in the question and answer box. Just a reminder for everyone, we have our Mad World User Conference coming up. So whether you're in Flare and Central, Ixiasoft, CCMS, there is a track for everybody. So we would invite you to register. There is a discount when you register before the end of this month. You can attend live or virtually if you want. We would love to see you in person. Not everybody can travel, so understand that. We would love to see you virtually as well. So encourage you to pop up to the site to check out all of the amazing sessions and speakers that we've got lined up. We would love to have you there. Okay, so Nolan, a couple questions for you. You ready?
Okay.
All right. So one question came in. So it looks like, surely digital content pollutes less than printed books. I'm thinking about water, energy, the shipping. So can you comment a little bit about that?
The answer is yes, one-on-one. The answer is yes, one-on-one. We actually have a customer who is has been moving away from printed books, especially on the legalese content, which is provided on the web now. However, when things are easier to do, they might lead to a rebound effect. So it's better to think about the usage, and that's going to actually be part of my next research into this. What happens when there are a rebound effect on the content, where a good idea, what seems to be a good idea, backfires.
Got it. Yeah. So another one came in, thinking about, the written word on the page and multimedia files. The thinking internally is to create more videos from this particular person who just asked. So my boss wants us to create more videos. Is that something that we should be mindful of? Should we stop and create images or written instructions instead? How does that impact some of this?
Well, of course, text is the ultimate compression format, is the lighter form of content. However, videos can be super effective into answering a question. So again, it's a question of how is that video stored, created, used, and streamed. And basically, videos for everything is a bad idea. Video for nothing is not necessarily the answer. The answer is really to design for what works best. So, for example, videos can be super efficient, especially instructional videos can be super efficient for safe manipulation, for example, to prevent spills or waste in a lab. So, that has to count for something, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay. So another great question's come in. I don't think we can wrap today without talking about artificial intelligence, because that's on everybody's mind, right? And so the question came in is, will AI help create a better, greener environment or help create greener content? What are your thoughts on the AI side of things?
Well, if we're talking generative AI and large language model, first off, the way they're created and trained is consume a lot of energy. Each AI generation creates and uses a lot of energy. I don't think that is going to be a green option, really, at the moment. What I think is that AI will help, but more into providing good answers, data mining and analyzing content that otherwise a human being couldn't, could not process that information, such as weather evolution, how much water you should put to the crop, these kind of things. On the generative AI, I don't think so. I'm a little bit more dubious.
Maybe, you had a great slide about, reducing, content anyway, taking a content audit. Do we need everything? I mean, is there a place for it to sort of help consolidate the actual text and things on the page? I mean, if text is the greenest, do you see it kind of coming into play where it's like, hey, can we say this in fewer words? Can we, say this in more simpler language? Can you see that coming into play here?
Ben, the human mind is faster and more economical. So of course you can say that for everything. It can help, it can help on the training side, enforcing some rules, for example. That's certainly true. But is that a greener option? This is also going to be on on the next webinar, because here we're considering it's about crafting the content versus consuming the content. So if we create, a more accessible content, a more readable content that can be understood right away and put into an action right away, that is going to be consumed faster, right? So less consumption there, but maybe a little bit more on the start. So again, this is a balance that we'll dig a little bit into at a later stage.
Right. So another question came in. How does this relate to minimalism? That's a term. So can you talk a little bit about what, quote, minimalism is, how it could potentially help?
Yes. Yes, minimalism is the practice of crafting information that users need. So in a very simple phrase. And the idea, again, is to provide actionable information that is findable, that is usable, that is accurate, and to also minimize the noise that is made by superfluous content. So it goes strictly to the meat, should we say. Especially this is based also on audience analysis. You don't want to repeat what the users already know, what your audience already know. From a training example, you wouldn't provide a bookkeeping through the ages to a professional accountant. Well, first off, they don't care, probably, and otherwise they probably know already, right? So it's
right.
Thinking about minimalism, it's not necessarily creating less content, but it's creating information that is going to be useful.
Got it. Great. Well, I think we have time for a couple more. So another great question came in. How do we compare two solutions to know which is less polluting? MailChimp push versus website pull, or an app, both?
Great question. You have to consider as well the device that is going to be used for all of these, right? So again, MailChimp is embedded into a website, right? So it's stored there. Should you push content or should you pull content? That's a good question. Newsletters, a lot of newsletters, I'm sorry to say, are not read. And one of the digital cleanup day action is to remove subscriptions to content that you don't read, and especially newsletter. So again, how the push that is automated for you as a receiver of this newsletter, it's something to think about. So I'm not really answering your question here. We need to go into how to calculate, the consumption. So there are in the previous slides there are examples of ways you can weight your code or your website, and that's probably going to be a starting point. All right. So that would be my answer. Yeah.
Great, thank you. What about okay, so we talked about the cloud. You mentioned this a little bit in the presentation. Yeah. Can you comment a bit on how storing in the cloud could be considered green?
That's a good question. Actually, so the general rule is that storing content, archiving content locally instead of on the cloud is better. Because of course the cloud is maintained live, and it's in most cases, not all, but a lot of cases, it's 99.9% available. So this means there is a lot of power behind it, behind that content. However, the cloud has provided the ability to pull together resources, computing resources, and content resources as well. If you think about it, there is one space for everyone to go and look at the content instead of everyone having a copy. So considered green, the cloud considered green in the fact that it can bring together those resources and be more efficient in the consumption of electricity, if instead of each and every company having their own server room, etc., and maybe having too much space, not enough space, server disks failure, etc. This is pulled together. So that's the idea. However, storing, if we're talking storing content in the case of archiving, well, it's much better to have that on a local device than on the cloud, certainly.
Right.
Great question.
One last mechanical question. Just, I think this will benefit everybody. That was will this deck be available? And the answer is yes. We will be sending out this asset to everybody after the presentation. And speaking of, with that, I think this is a good time to wrap. Nolan, this is great. We'll give everybody a little bit of their hour back. How's that? And this has been so helpful. I'm grateful for your time today. I know it's late in your day, so we are very grateful. So for those of you connecting all over the world, thank you, Nolan. So I want to thank everybody for joining today. I want to thank everybody for their engagement and fantastic questions. And yeah, we hope to see you at the conference and perhaps another webinar soon. And again, thanks everybody for joining. And thanks again, Nolan, for your time and your energy here. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. So thanks so much, everybody. Take good care.